All right, so you've given us a ton of stuff on international marketing and R&D strategy, articles, research, even a specific file called Chapter 10 2425.pdf. It's quite the collection.
Yeah, a real deep dive into how companies not only sell across borders, but also innovate in those global markets.
Exactly. And that's our mission here, right? To give our listeners a clear understanding of these complex topics without getting bogged down in too much detail.
Okay.
So where should we start? Oh, I know. Let's define what marketing actually is. Seems basic, but it's fundamental.
Yeah, good starting point. The American Marketing Association back in 2017 actually defined it quite broadly. Marketing is the activity, set of institutions, and processes for creating, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings that have value for customers, clients, partners, and society at large. Quite a mouthful.
It is, but it does highlight how marketing isn't just about, making a sale. It's about creating value for, well, everyone involved.
Right, value creation and delivery, not just the transaction itself. That's crucial.
Now, Philip Kotler, a bit of a legend in marketing, defined it in 2016 as the science and art of exploring, creating, and delivering value to satisfy the needs of a target market, customers, at a profit. And he also famously said, marketing takes a day to learn. Unfortunately, it takes a lifetime to master.
Oh, I love that quote. It really shows how marketing is constantly evolving. You never stop learning.
Right, so it's not just a set of rules, it's a dynamic process. Then we have Peter Drucker. His view was seeing the business through the customer's eyes.
Simple, yet so insightful. Drucker argued that, at its core, a business exists to create customer value.
And he believed that the customer's perspective of what they're buying is more important than what the company thinks it's selling.
Precisely. He also argued that every part of a business is about marketing and innovation, that it's not just a separate department.
So essentially, the customer is the heart of it all. Okay, with that foundation, let's talk about international marketing, taking those ideas and applying them across national borders.
Right, going global. Marketing products to people outside of a brand's home country. And that's become much easier with all the advancements in technology, communication, and global finance.
Yeah, the world is definitely more interconnected these days. The WTO reported a huge increase in international merchandise trade between 1951 and 2010. 33 times more trade? That's mind-blowing.
It is, but there's a caveat here. The materials emphasize that markets and brands aren't always truly global. What works in one place might not in another.
Right. Take McDonald's. There are menu changes from country to country. You won't find the same McArabia in France that you get in the Middle East, or the Croque McDo here in the U.S.
So you need a local touch, even when you're a global brand. Adapting to different takes and cultures is key. And this is where a robust international marketing strategy comes in, one that's closely aligned with the company's overall goals.
Absolutely. And as the materials stress, this strategy can't be separate from R&D. You need solid research to really understand your target market, their needs, their preferences, and how to best reach them. And that's where R&D comes in.
Yes, R&D is crucial for understanding your markets, pricing your products right, and getting them where they need to be.
Okay, let's get down to the basics. What is a marketing strategy? I mean, why do companies even bother with all this?
Well, at its simplest, a marketing strategy aims to promote a product and make a profit, but it's also about creating value for your customers and building long-term relationships with them.
We're seeing a shift from being solely focused on manufacturing efficiency to really understanding and meeting customer needs. That's the core of a customer value-driven strategy.
Right. A marketing strategy answers two key questions. First, where are we going? This sets the objectives. Then, how do we get there? This is your marketing plan, and that involves analyzing your own company's strengths and the external environment.
So the strategy sets the big picture, and the plan maps out the specifics. Now, the material mentions the Ansoff Matrix as a key tool for companies to map out their growth strategies.
Yeah, the Ansoff Matrix, a classic framework. It lays out 4 basic strategies depending on whether you're focusing on existing markets, existing products, or new products. It looks at all the combinations.
And those 4 strategies are market penetration, market development, product development, and diversification. And the further you move away from your existing markets and products, the riskier it gets.
Absolutely. So let's go through each one. Market penetration. This is where you're selling more of your existing products to your existing markets. Think increasing market share, maybe tweaking your pricing a bit, or improving distribution.
And companies often go international with this strategy when their domestic markets are saturated or their growth at home is slowing down. They're looking for new customers for the same tried and true product.
The material actually lists 5 main ways to do this domestically. Adjusting pricing, maybe with discounts or promotions, ramping up your advertising, finding new ways to distribute your product, maybe online, improving your product by adding features or starting a loyalty program.
Makes sense. Now, market development, that's where things start to get a bit more adventurous. You're taking existing products into new markets.
Exactly. And it's less risky because you're not having to invest in totally new product development. You're leveraging what you already have.
So it could mean targeting new customer segments, expanding into new geographic regions domestically, or going international. It's essentially what Pankaj Ghemawat calls the aggregation goal, using economies of scale to increase your profitability.
Right. Think new packaging to attract a different customer segment, or selling your product in a new country. Now, product development, that's about coming up with new products for your existing markets.
And that often means adapting to different needs and preferences in international markets, essentially what Ghemawat calls adaptation.
Precisely. Product development can lead to serious growth in sales and market share. You might do this by investing in your own R&D to create new products, or by acquiring rights to someone else's product.
Right, you're giving your existing customers something new and innovative. But there are risks. R&D is expensive, launching new products is always tricky, and sometimes you need to build new capabilities within your company to make it all work.
Absolutely. Now, diversification. This is the most risky strategy because you're going with both new products and new markets. It's like jumping into the unknown with both feet.
Yeah, high risk, high reward. This can be linked to what's often called a transnational strategy, trying to get the best of both worlds' global reach with local adaptation.
Right, balancing global efficiency with local responsiveness. Richard Whittington's research highlights some reasons companies go for diversification. Sometimes they can use existing resources or their brand name in a new market. Other times it's about leveraging the skills of their management team or maybe trying to increase their market power by entering new industries.
The materials mention related and unrelated diversification. Related diversification is when there's some connection between your existing business and the new venture, like a leather shoemaker branching out to leather car seats. Unrelated diversification is when the new ventures have nothing to do with your current business.
Like Mitsubishi, they have their hands in everything from cars to electronics to banking.
Samsung is a great example, too. They started as a trading company and expanded into all sorts of unrelated areas. And the materials actually mention some Bahraini examples like Dadabhai and Canoe, which have diversified quite a bit over the years.
So the Ansoff Matrix gives us a framework to think about how companies choose their growth strategies. It's a useful tool for visualizing the options and the risks involved. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the more tactical side of marketing, the marketing mix and its link to market segmentation.
Okay, and Wilcox provides a great framework for understanding how these two ideas fit together. We're talking about the famous 4 Ps of marketing.
Yes. Product, price, promotion, and place. The core elements of any marketing plan. Wilcox argues that how you choose to standardize or customize each of these elements for different international markets really depends on how you've segmented your market.
Right. Market segmentation is basically dividing a market into groups of buyers who have similar needs, characteristics, or behaviors.
Right. Domestically, companies segment markets by geography, demographics, things like age, income, education, or by psychographic factors like lifestyle and values.
But internationally, it gets more complex. Wilcox suggests using pestle analysis. That's looking at the political, economic, sociocultural, technological, environmental, and legal factors in a country.
And then there's the CAGE framework, which looks at the cultural, administrative, geographic, and economic distances between countries. It helps you understand the real differences between countries and how they might influence consumer behavior.
Okay, so you've segmented your market. What's next?
Market targeting. You evaluate each segment and decide which ones to enter. Ideally, you want segments that are profitable, where you can offer real value, and that you can sustain over time.
So you choose your battlefield, so to speak.
Yeah.
And you might start with a single segment and expand later. Now, I know we mentioned this before with McDonald's, but different segments might require you to change your marketing mix.
Exactly. A car company might target people who care about price and fuel efficiency with a certain model, and then target people who want luxury and comfort with another totally different model.
Think Corolla versus Lexus. Same company, completely different target markets. It's interesting to see how some segments have similar buying behavior across borders while others don't.
Yes, that's often the case with industrial products where the focus is on functionality and performance. But consumer goods, they're heavily influenced by culture and local preferences. You can't just assume a product that sells well in one country will automatically sell well in another.
So a truly global strategy with a standardized marketing mix only works if the segments you're targeting actually transcend national borders.
Right, when you have similar groups of buyers with similar needs and wants in different countries. That brings us back to those basic international business strategies we discussed earlier, especially in the context of the Ansoff matrix.
Everything's connected, isn't it?
It is. Now, Wilcox argues that any marketing strategy begins with understanding your environment.
Right, environmental scanning and analysis.
Yeah.
He really emphasizes using both PESTEL and the CAGE framework.
And interestingly, even with globalization, he says the CAGE framework, which focuses on the distances between countries, is still extremely relevant.
Those distances, they create both barriers and opportunities when you're doing business internationally.
Yeah.
So you analyze your environment, you segment your market, you choose your target. What's the next piece of the puzzle?
Well, it's about understanding the entire journey your customer takes with your brand, from the moment they first become aware of you to hopefully becoming a loyal advocate. This is where customer lifecycle marketing and customer relationship management come in.
CRM, right. It's about engaging with your customers and encouraging them to come back for more.
Exactly. And CRM systems are the tools that help you manage those interactions effectively.
The material mentions a matrix by Jim Stern and Matt Cutler that outlines 5 stages: reach, acquisition, conversion, retention, and loyalty.
And Wilcox has a similar model. He calls them awareness, evaluation, purchase, product and support experience, and bonding.
Both models are basically about guiding the potential customers to become loyal fans of your brand.
Exactly. So let's look at Wilcox's model in detail. First, you have awareness. This is where the customer first learns about your brand or your products. Wilcox mentions the rule of 7. Customers often need to see your message 7 times before it really sticks.
I've heard that before. Makes sense. We're bombarded with so much information these days.
We are. So you need to be creative and use multiple channels to get your message out there, both traditional advertising and things like word-of-mouth referrals, social media influencers, and online content marketing.
Then comes evaluation. This is where the customer starts actively looking for information, comparing your offerings to your competitors. They're deciding if you really meet their needs.
And they're using the internet and all the information available online to do this. After evaluation comes the purchase stage. This is where the customer actually buys your product or service. And this is where it's crucial not only to deliver what you promised, but also to start building a positive relationship with that new customer.
You want to make a good first impression. And after the purchase comes retention. This is about getting customers to come back and buy again, keeping them happy, valuing their feedback, going the extra mile.
Right. Wilcox points out that it's much more expensive to acquire a new customer than it is to retain an existing one. So customer retention is key.
It's cheaper to keep them happy than to find new ones.
Exactly. The last stage is loyalty or bonding. This is where your customers become true advocates for your brand. They recommend you to their friends, they leave positive reviews, they basically become walking billboards for your company.
That's the dream, isn't it? To have customers so happy that they do your marketing for you.
Absolutely. And Wilcox summarizes the benefits of strong customer relationships. More frequent purchases, valuable referrals, the potential to charge a premium for your products, and a much easier time selling new products or services.
So it's not just about making a sale, it's about building a loyal customer base. Okay, let's talk about how to do that. Let's dive into the marketing mix, the 4 Ps.
Okay, so in 1960, E. Jerome McCarthy introduced this fundamental idea of the 4 Ps, stating that effective marketing requires you to provide the right product at the right price, in the right place, and with the right promotion. And importantly, these elements are all interconnected.
The materials actually use the example of Netflix, which I think is a great illustration. Their own original content is the product. Streaming anytime, anywhere is the place. Their brand awareness is the promotion, and the different subscription options are the price. It all works together.
Precisely. It's about carefully crafting a mix of these elements that will resonate with your target market. But it's also crucial to consider the customer's perspective. Robert Lauterborn proposed the 4 Cs as a counterpoint to the 4 Ps.
Right, so instead of focusing on the product, you think about what problem it solves for the customer solution. Instead of price, you consider the customer cost, not just the monetary price, but also the time and effort involved.
Instead of just choosing the most efficient place to sell your product, You think about convenience for the buyer, and instead of just blasting out your promotion messages, you focus on having a two-way communication with your audience.
So you have to balance both perspectives, yours and the customer's. It's about finding that sweet spot.
Exactly. It's about making your marketing truly customer-centric. The materials also mention the extended marketing mix.
The 7Ps and 7Cs.
Yes, adding people, process, and physical evidence to the 4Ps, and caring, coordination, and confirmation to the 4Cs. It's a more comprehensive view, especially for service-based businesses.
Okay, let's zoom in on the first P, product.
A product, at its core, is anything that can satisfy a want or need. It can be a physical good or an intangible service. Wilcox describes a product as a bundle of attributes customers find attractive.
Right. It's not just the core function, but also things like its design, the service that comes with it, the overall experience. It's the whole package.
Kotler and Armstrong echo this. They define a product as the total package of attributes a customer gets. Think about the packaging of a Rolex watch versus a Swatch. The Rolex comes with this aura of prestige, even though both tell time. Or the importance of after-sales service when you buy a car. It's all part of the product experience.
And the materials highlight 3 key things that might require companies to change their products for international markets. First, cultural differences.
Yeah, different cultures have different preferences, traditions, values. Companies need to understand these nuances and adapt their products accordingly.
Think about Nestle and Coca-Cola. They have global products, but they often adapt them to local tastes and preferences.
Right. Finding that balance between standardization and customization is key. The second factor is the level of economic development.
So a product that's popular in a developed country might not make sense in a developing country, where consumers might prioritize basic functionality and affordability. Like, you might see more demand for basic mobile phones in some markets compared to the latest smartphones in others.
Exactly. And the third factor is product and technological standards. These can vary significantly from country to country, sometimes requiring physical modifications.
Like left-hand drive cars versus right-hand drive cars. Okay, and tied to the product is the concept of brand. The AMA defines a brand as a customer experience represented by a collection of images and ideas. Think about a brand's name, its logo, its slogan, its design.
Right. They're all signals that create a certain perception in the customer's mind. Some companies manage many brands, like Unilever and Procter & Gamble. Others extend their brands across different sectors, like Virgin. And then there are brands that extend across products, like Harley-Davidson and Mercedes-Benz. They're selling more than just motorcycles and cars.
Yeah, you see Harley-Davidson clothing, Mercedes-Benz watches. It's all about leveraging a strong brand.
And that's one of the key strategic advantages of building a powerful brand. You can use brand extension to enter new markets or product categories more easily. You have leverage with retailers and distributors, and a strong brand helps you stand out from the competition.
It's like a shield against price wars.
Exactly. A brand can even become a company's core competency, something that sets it apart from everyone else. And brands can be so valuable that they're bought and sold independently of the company's production facilities. Jon Stewart, the former CEO of Quaker Oats, famously said, "If this business were to be split up, I would be happy to take the brands, trademarks, and goodwill, and you could have all the bricks and mortar, and I would make out better than you."
And that's reflected in the rankings of the world's most valuable brands. As of 2024, the top 10 was dominated by tech giants like Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Samsung, each worth hundreds of billions of dollars.
Brands are powerful assets. Now, moving on to the second P, price.
Kotler and Armstrong define price as the amount of money charged for a product or service, or the sum of all the values that customers exchange for the benefits of having or using the product or service. It's not always about the actual money involved.
Right. Economists tend to see price as set by the market, but marketers see it as a strategic tool, a way to communicate quality, increase sales, or even discourage competition.
It's the only one of the 4 Ps that actually generates revenue for a company. The others are all costs. And price plays a big role in how customers perceive value.
It does. If the price is too high compared to the perceived value, customers won't buy. If it's too low, they might question the quality. Finding the right balance is crucial.
The materials list 3 main ways companies think about pricing: cost-based pricing, customer value-based pricing, and competition-based pricing.
Right. Cost-based pricing is pretty straightforward. You look at your total costs and add your desired profit margin, but it doesn't take into account what customers are actually willing to pay. It just ensures you're covering your expenses.
It sets the floor, but not necessarily the ceiling.
Exactly. It's often used as part of a market entry strategy, but rarely as the only pricing method.
Now, customer value-based pricing flips that on its head. It starts with what the customer thinks the product is worth.
It's about understanding the customer's perception of value and pricing your product accordingly.
And this is where the power of buyers, one of Porter's 5 forces, comes in. If buyers have lots of choices, they'll go for the product that offers the best value for their money.
And then we have competition-based pricing, which focuses on what your competitors are doing. You look at their prices, their costs, their offerings. It helps you figure out where you sit in the market.
So your own costs set the floor, customer value sets the ceiling, and competition helps you find the right spot in between. The materials then go on to describe a bunch of specific pricing strategies: penetration pricing, skimming pricing, discriminatory pricing, predatory pricing, multi-point pricing, and experience curve effect pricing. It's quite a list.
It is. So let's go through them one by one. Penetration pricing is about setting a low initial price to quickly gain market share. You see this a lot with new products or services.
Like those introductory offers for magazines.
Exactly. Skimming pricing is the opposite. You start with a high price to attract early adopters who are less price sensitive.
Think about those new smartphones that launch with a high price tag and then gradually get cheaper.
Right. Discriminatory pricing, that's where you charge different prices to different segments for the same product.
Movie theaters do this with student and senior discounts. Restaurants might charge different prices in different locations.
Even retailers sometimes have different prices online versus in their physical stores. It can be controversial, though. Customers don't always like feeling like they're being charged more than someone else for the same thing.
The materials give an example of a travel company that supposedly shows Mac users higher hotel prices. Whether or not that's true, it illustrates the potential downside of discriminatory pricing.
It can lead to bad press. Now, predatory pricing is a really aggressive strategy. You basically set your prices super low, sometimes even below your costs, to drive competitors out of business.
We saw this with airlines battling for transatlantic routes, and the materials mention the example of Bahrain Air in the late 1990s.
It's often illegal because it stifles competition. It can be especially problematic in international markets, where a company might use profits from one country to subsidize super low prices in another.
Right, using their financial muscle to crush the competition. Then there's multi-point pricing, which recognizes that your prices in one market can affect your rivals' prices in other markets.
The classic example is Kodak and Fuji. They used to be constantly adjusting their prices based on what the other was doing. And finally, experience curve effect pricing. That's about taking a short-term hit, maybe even losing money, in the hope that you'll get so good at producing your product that your costs will go down in the long run, giving you a competitive edge.
It's a bit of a gamble, isn't it?
It is, and Wilcox points out that both predatory pricing and experience curve pricing can sometimes run afoul of anti-dumping laws and competition regulations.
Right. Governments want to make sure that companies are playing fair. Okay, let's move on to the third P, promotion.
Promotion is all about communicating with your customers, telling them about your company, your brand, your products, and the internet has totally changed the game.
Yeah, everything's digital now, but the core methods of the promotional mix are still relevant, right?
They are. We're talking about advertising, personal selling, public relations, sponsorships, direct mail, exhibitions, word-of-mouth marketing, social media, and even using things like coupons. It's a broad toolbox.
And advertising still plays a major role, especially for big brands. Think about Rolex and their huge advertising budgets.
Right. But it's important to note that not all advertising is about promoting a specific brand. Sometimes it's about increasing demand for an entire product category.
Like those Got Milk campaigns.
Exactly. That's called primary demand advertising.
Okay, and then there's the more traditional secondary demand advertising, which is about differentiating your brand from the competition.
Right. And advertising can be used to either increase demand or justify a higher price.
Interesting. So how much a company spends on advertising depends on a bunch of things, right?
It does. The stage of the product's life cycle, whether it's new or established, the company's market share, how intense the competition is, whether they're targeting businesses or consumers, and even the overall economic climate.
Okay, makes sense. Now, how about in international markets? What are the challenges there?
Well, Wilcox points out a few key hurdles. Cultural barriers, for one. Your message might not be understood the same way in different cultures. You might need to adapt your language, your imagery, your overall message.
Yet what works in one culture might be totally off-putting in another.
Exactly. Wilcox suggests a few ways to overcome these barriers. You have to develop cross-cultural literacy, maybe hire local agencies that understand the target market, or use local sales forces.
Right, get people on the ground who really know the culture. What else?
Source and country of origin effects can also be tricky. Customers might judge a product based on where it's from or who's selling it.
Think about BP changing their name in the U.S. after the oil spill, or people preferring products from countries known for quality craftsmanship. Those perceptions can make a big difference.
They can. And then there are noise levels, which refers to the amount of competing messages out there. Wilcox argues that noise levels are higher in developed countries because there's simply more advertising and media saturation.
It's harder to cut through the clutter.
It is. Now, in terms of international communication strategies, you have two basic approaches, push and pull.
What's the difference?
A push strategy emphasizes personal selling. You're actively pushing your product onto the customer through your sales force. A pull strategy relies more on mass media advertising to create demand. You're trying to pull customers in.
So how do you choose which strategy to use?
It depends on a few things. The type of product and how sophisticated your customers are. If you're selling complex industrial equipment, you might need a push strategy with a knowledgeable sales force to explain the product. If you're selling consumer goods, a pull strategy with mass advertising might be more effective. It also depends on the length of your distribution channel. If it's long, with many intermediaries, a pull strategy might be better. And finally, it depends on the availability of media. If mass media is limited, a push strategy might be your only option.
So it's about choosing the right approach based on your specific situation. Okay, let's move on to the last P, place, which is all about distribution channels.
Right. Place refers to how you get your product to the end user.
And there are two main categories, direct and indirect.
Direct channels are when the manufacturer sells directly to the customer. Think direct mail, catalogs, or e-commerce.
And indirect channels involve intermediaries, right?
Right, like wholesalers, distributors, dealers, retailers. They all act as middlemen between the manufacturer and the consumer.
And companies might use both, right? Maybe selling directly to some customers and using intermediaries to reach a wider market.
Exactly. Think about a company that has their own retail stores, but also sells their products through other retailers.
Like Apple. They have Apple stores, but also sell their products through Best Buy and other electronics retailers. Do you have any Bahraini examples?
Let me think. Yeah, many Bahraini businesses use both direct and indirect channels. For example, a local food producer might sell directly to customers at a farmer's market, but also distribute their products through supermarkets.
Makes sense. Now, the choice of distribution channel can have a big impact on pricing, right?
Absolutely. If you're using indirect channels, each intermediary needs to make a profit. So the price goes up at each stage of the chain. Let's imagine a simple chain with a manufacturer, a distributor, a retailer, and the final consumer. The manufacturer sells to the distributor, who adds their markup, then sells to the retailer, who adds their markup, and finally, the product reaches the consumer at a higher price.
So the more intermediaries there are, the higher the final price.
Generally, yes. And the number of intermediaries can vary widely depending on the industry and the market.
Yes, some products go through a very long chain, while others go directly from the producer to the consumer.
Right. Think about locally grown produce sold at a farmer's market versus imported electronics sold through a national chain.
Okay, so what are the strategic approaches to distribution?
Wilcox outlines three main approaches: intensive distribution, selective distribution, and exclusive distribution.
So intensive distribution is about getting your product into as many outlets as possible.
Exactly. This works well for mass-produced products, basic supplies, things like snacks, magazines, soft drinks.
You want those products to be available everywhere.
Right. Selective distribution involves choosing a few intermediaries.
So this is for more specialized goods.
Yes, think craft tools, appliances, heavy equipment. You might only sell these through specialist dealers.
Makes sense. And then exclusive distribution is about using just one or very few intermediaries.
This is common for luxury goods, high-end fashion, things like Gucci. You want to maintain a sense of exclusivity and control over the brand experience.
So how do companies choose their international distribution strategy?
Wilcox says it depends on four main factors: retail concentration versus fragmentation, channel exclusivity, channel quality, and channel length.
So retail concentration versus fragmentation is about whether there are a few big retailers or many small ones.
Right. And it ties into that idea of intensive distribution. If you have a lot of small retailers, you need an intensive strategy to reach them all.
Makes sense. What's channel exclusivity?
Channel exclusivity is about how difficult it is to get your products into certain retail channels. Some retailers prefer to work with established brands.
So this links to that exclusive distribution strategy we talked about.
Right. If you want to be in high-end stores, you might need to offer them exclusive rights to sell your product in their region.
And what about channel quality?
Channel quality is about the expertise and knowledge of the intermediaries.
So if you're selling a complex product that requires specialist knowledge, you might need to invest in training your distributors or even open your own stores.
Right. Apple does this in many developed countries. They have their own Apple stores because they want to control the customer experience and ensure that their staff have the knowledge to properly explain and demonstrate their products.
Makes sense. And what was the last factor?
Channel length. This refers to the number of intermediaries between the manufacturer and the consumer, and it's closely related to retail concentration versus fragmentation.
So in a fragmented market with lots of small retailers, you'd have a longer channel, right?
Exactly. And longer channels mean higher costs because each intermediary adds their markup. So if price is a key factor, companies will try to keep their channels as short as possible.
Okay, so distribution strategy is a balancing act. You're trying to find the right approach based on the specific market you're operating in, taking into account cost, control, and customer experience.
Exactly. Now, shifting gears again, let's talk about research and development, which is crucial for innovation and long-term growth.
R&D. That's about coming up with new products, new technologies, right?
It is. It's defined as creative work undertaken on a systematic basis in order to increase the stock of knowledge, including knowledge of man, culture, and society, and the use of this stock of knowledge to devise new applications. Think of pharmaceutical companies testing new drugs.
Yeah, R&D is a big part of that industry. So why do companies invest in R&D?
Well, for one, products become obsolete. Technology evolves, consumer needs change, so you need to constantly innovate to stay ahead of the curve.